A millionaire hadn't smiled in years until a poor, hungry girl changed everything, and their lives were never the same again. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The gun felt cold against Robert Harrison's temple as he sat alone in his Manhattan penthouse office. At 40 years old, he was worth $3 billion, owned properties on 4 continents, and controlled the lives of thousands of employees. Yet tonight, none of it mattered. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. That's how long it had been since he'd last smiled. Since the accident. Since he'd learned that all the money in the world couldn't buy back what truly mattered. His hand trembled as thunder crashed outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawled below him like scattered diamonds, but all he saw was darkness. Then he heard it, a sound that shouldn't exist on the 42nd floor of a secured building. Singing. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Robert's eyes snapped open. The voice was small, pure, and coming from his private balcony. Impossible. He lowered the gun and moved toward the window. Through the rain-streaked glass, he saw her, a tiny girl with tangled blonde hair soaked to the bone, perched impossibly on the narrow ledge outside. She was singing softly to a stuffed rabbit while rain poured down her face. "You make me happy when skies are gray." How had a child reached the 42nd floor? Why wasn't she terrified? And why did her voice sound like hope itself? Robert yanked open the balcony door. "Hey, what are you doing out there? You?" The little girl turned, revealing the most striking blue eyes he'd ever seen. She couldn't have been older than 7, wearing a torn yellow dress that had seen better years. But she smiled at him, actually smiled, as if finding a stranger with a gun was the most natural thing in the world. "Hi, mister." "I'm Lily," she said cheerfully, as if they were meeting at a playground instead of 42 stories above certain death. "Are you sad too?" Robert's throat tightened. "How did you get up here?" "I climbed," she said simply. "When you're really sad, sometimes you need to get closer to the clouds. They understand crying better than people do." Something shattered inside Robert's chest. This child, this impossible, fearless child, had somehow scaled a skyscraper just to cry closer to heaven. "You need to come inside," he said, extending his hand. "It's dangerous out there." Lily studied his face with those ancient blue eyes. "You were about to do something dangerous too, weren't you?" Robert froze. How could a 7-year-old possibly understand what she'd interrupted? "Please come inside," he whispered. Lily took his hand, her tiny fingers ice-cold but steady. As she stepped into his office, she glanced at the gun on his desk, then back at his face. "I'm really hungry," she said softly. "Do you have any cookies?" In that moment, Robert Harrison realized he was no longer alone with his demons. But what he didn't know was that this little girl carried secrets darker than his own. And their meeting would unleash a chain of events that would either save them both or destroy everything he had left. The rain continued to fall, but for the first time in 3 years, Robert wasn't counting the days since his last smile. Robert's hand shook as he wrapped Lily in his cashmere overcoat, the expensive fabric swallowing her tiny frame completely. She was so small, so impossibly fragile, yet she'd somehow accomplished what trained security experts would consider impossible. His building wasn't just any Manhattan high-rise. It was a fortress designed by paranoid billionaires for paranoid billionaires. Motion sensors, pressure plates, thermal imaging, laser grids. 24-hour armed security. Steel barriers that could stop a military assault. Yet here sat a 7-year-old who'd scaled it like climbing a backyard fence. "The cookies are in the kitchen," he said, his voice rougher than intended, betraying emotions he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten they existed. "But first, we need to call someone. Your parents must be worried sick." Lily's smile, that radiant, impossible smile that had stopped him from pulling the trigger, faltered for the first time since she'd appeared like an angel on his balcony. Her cornflower blue eyes darkened, and she clutched her soggy stuffed rabbit tighter against her chest. "I don't have parents anymore," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rain still hammering against the windows. "They went to heaven 3 weeks ago. Car accident on the Brooklyn Bridge. The social worker said it was instantaneous, that they didn't suffer." The words hit Robert like a physical blow, stealing the breath from his lungs. He knelt beside her chair, studying those impossibly expressive eyes that seemed to hold more pain than any child should ever know. In them, he recognized something terrifyingly familiar, the hollow emptiness that comes after losing everything that matters. "Lily, sweetheart, who's been taking care of you since then?" He asked gently, though part of him already dreaded the answer. "Nobody," she whispered, pulling Mr. Whiskers closer until her knuckles turned white. "The foster care system was supposed to place me somewhere new, but there was a mix-up with the paperwork. I got scared waiting in that grey building with all the crying children, so I ran away. I've been living in Central Park for 3 weeks, hiding under the Bow Bridge, where the tourists don't usually go." Robert's chest tightened with each word. The park? At night? In this weather? She nodded, and he noticed the way her small shoulders trembled, not from cold, but from memories. "Mr. Whiskers and I found a good hiding spot behind some bushes. We built a little shelter out of cardboard and plastic bags. But it gets really cold at night, and sometimes the mean teenagers come by with their bottles and loud music. They threw rocks at us once." Every instinct screamed at Robert to call Child Protective Services, to follow protocol, to maintain the carefully constructed distance from human suffering that had kept him functional for the past 3 years. But something in Lily's voice, a quiet strength wrapped in devastating vulnerability, stopped him cold. "Are you going to send me away?" she asked, those ancient eyes searching his face for any sign of rejection. Robert looked at this extraordinary child who'd literally fallen from the sky into his darkest moment and felt something crack inside his chest, something that had been frozen solid since Emma's funeral. "Not tonight," he heard himself say. "Tonight, you're safe." But as he watched Lily carefully eat her first real meal in days, savoring each bite like it might be her last, one question burned in his mind like acid. How does a 7-year-old scale a 42-story building without anyone noticing? The next morning, Robert sat in his state-of-the-art security office, surrounded by banks of monitors displaying footage from every conceivable angle of his building. He'd been staring at the screens for 4 hours straight, reviewing 12 hours of high-definition surveillance footage, frame by frame. His eyes burned, his coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he couldn't stop searching. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. No trace of a small girl climbing anywhere, no shadow on any external camera, no heat signature on the thermal imaging. It was as if Lily had materialized from the ether itself. "Sir, I've reviewed everything twice, then had my entire team go through it again," said James Morrison, his head of security and a former Navy SEAL who'd never encountered a puzzle he couldn't solve. "There's literally no way she could have accessed the building. The balcony you found her on is completely isolated. No adjacent ledges, no fire escapes, no maintenance access, no possible climbing route. The nearest handholds are on the 38th floor, and even then, you'd need professional mountaineering equipment." Robert rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building behind his eyes. Upstairs in his guest bedroom, Lily was sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. He'd checked on her 3 times during the night, watching her small chest rise and fall, still half convinced she might disappear as mysteriously as she'd arrived. "Check the neighboring buildings," Robert ordered, though he already knew what they'd find. Maybe she somehow jumped from one of them. James pulled up architectural schematics on his tablet. "Sir, the nearest building is the Chrysler Building, and it's over 200 feet away. No child could make that jump and survive, especially in last night's storm conditions. The wind shear alone would have been fatal." The impossibility of it gnawed at Robert's logical mind like a persistent itch. He'd built his empire on facts, data, provable realities. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Lily was here, real as the coffee growing cold in his hands, warm as the trust she'd placed in a complete stranger. His secure phone buzzed, displaying an unknown number. "Mr. Harrison, this is Detective Sarah Martinez, NYPD Missing Persons Unit. We have a situation regarding a missing child case that might interest you." Robert's blood turned to ice water. "What kind of situation?" "A homeless 7-year-old named Lily Parker. Blonde hair, blue eyes, approximately 4 feet tall. She's been missing for 3 weeks since her foster parents died in a car accident on the Brooklyn Bridge. We have surveillance footage of her in your general neighborhood yesterday evening around the time of the storm, but then she just vanishes from every camera simultaneously." The room began to spin. Foster parents' car accident, 3 weeks. Every detail matched perfectly. "Mr. Harrison, are you there?" "Yes," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "What else can you tell me about her background?" "That's the truly strange part, sir. Before the Parkers took her in 6 months ago, there's absolutely no record of her existence anywhere in the system. No birth certificate, no medical records, no school enrollment, no immigration documentation. It's like she appeared out of thin air." Robert hung up and stared at the bank of security monitors, each one showing empty corridors and normal building operations. Somewhere in his penthouse, a child who shouldn't exist was sleeping soundly, clutching a stuffed rabbit and trusting him completely. But the question that terrified him most wasn't how she'd found him. It was why. "Your daughter's name was Emma Catherine Harrison," Lily said quietly over breakfast, not looking up from the Mickey Mouse pancakes Robert's housekeeper had prepared. "She would have been 10 years old next month on April 3rd. She loved purple butterflies and chocolate ice cream, and she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up, so she could save all the hurt animals." Robert's fork clattered to his plate, the sound echoing through his designer kitchen like a gunshot. He hadn't mentioned Emma to anyone in 3 years. Her name wasn't in any news articles, any public records that a homeless child could have accessed. He'd made sure of that, using his wealth and influence to keep her memory private, sacred. "How could you possibly know that name?" he whispered, his voice hoarse with shock. Lily's cornflower blue eyes met his across the marble breakfast table, suddenly looking far older than 7, ancient, knowing, filled with a wisdom that made his skin crawl. "She visits my dreams sometimes when the moon is bright and I'm feeling really alone. She has your eyes, you know, the same grey colour as storm clouds." The kitchen began to spin around Robert like a carnival ride. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. "That's completely impossible. You couldn't know what she looked like." "She also says you blame yourself for the accident, but it wasn't your fault," Lily continued, her voice soft but unwavering. "The other driver, his name was Marcus Webb, had been drinking at 3 different bars that afternoon. His blood alcohol was twice the legal limit. She says you keep replaying that moment in your mind, wondering if you could have called out to her, if you could have run faster, if you could have somehow changed what happened." Robert's breath caught in his throat. Marcus Webb. He'd memorized every detail of the police report, had hired private investigators to learn everything about the man who'd stolen his world. But that information wasn't public knowledge. "She also says you keep her favorite teddy bear in the bottom drawer of your office desk," Lily said, taking another careful bite of pancake. "The purple one with the missing left eye that she called Princess Patches. She slept with it every night from when she was 3 until the accident." Robert stood so abruptly, his chair toppled backward, crashing to the marble floor. Princess Patches. He'd never told anyone about that bear. He'd hidden it away the day after the funeral, unable to bear looking at it, but unable to throw it away either. It had been Emma's most treasured possession, worn thin from years of love and countless tea parties. She wants you to know she's okay, Lily continued, her voice growing softer, more ethereal. She says heaven isn't scary, like she thought it would be. There are lots of other children there, and animals too. All the pets she always wanted, but couldn't have because of your allergies. She wants you to smile again, because she says your sadness is keeping her from being completely happy. Stop, Robert said, backing against the kitchen wall, his chest heaving. Just stop this right now. I don't know how you know these things, but this is cruel. You're just a child. You can't possibly understand what you're doing to me. She says that's why she sent me to you, Lily interrupted, standing on her chair to meet his eyes directly. Because she knew you'd try to hurt yourself on the anniversary, and she was scared you wouldn't wait for me to find you. She says she's been looking for someone special to take care of you, someone who understands what it's like to lose everything. Robert staggered backward, his heart hammering against his ribs. The anniversary, March 15th. 3 days away. He'd never told anyone the significance of that date, had never revealed his annual ritual of standing at that intersection, reliving those horrible moments. Who are you? He breathed, studying this impossible child who knew secrets buried deeper than his own grave. Lily's expression grew infinitely sad, and for a moment she looked exactly like what she was, a traumatized 7-year-old who'd lost everything. I'm just a little girl who needed someone to love her, she whispered. But maybe I'm something else too. Maybe we both are exactly where we're supposed to be. Outside the kitchen windows, thunder rumbled across the Manhattan sky, though the weather forecast had called for clear skies all week. Dr. Rebecca Chen closed the thick manila file and removed her wire-rimmed glasses, studying Robert across her downtown office with the careful expression she reserved for her most complex cases. As his longtime psychiatrist and one of the few people who knew the complete truth about Emma's death, she was the only person he trusted with this impossible story that defied everything he understood about reality. Let me make sure I understand correctly, she said carefully, her voice maintaining the neutral tone that had helped him navigate 3 years of grief. You're telling me this child, this homeless 7-year-old, knows intimate details about Emma that you've never shared with anyone, including me. Oh, details that don't exist in any record anywhere, Robert confirmed, leaning forward in the leather chair he'd occupied every Thursday for 36 months. Private moments, conversations between Emma and me that happened when we were completely alone. Memories I've never spoken aloud to another human being. And the building security footage shows absolutely no trace of how she entered your building. None whatsoever. 24 hours of high-definition surveillance from every possible angle, and she simply doesn't appear until she's already on my balcony. It's like she materialized out of thin air. Doctor, Chen was quiet for a long moment, tapping her pen against her notepad in the rhythmic pattern that meant she was processing something significant. Robert, I need to ask this very carefully. Is it possible that in your emotional state last night, given what you were contemplating, you might have experienced some kind of hallucination or dissociative episode? She's real, Rebecca, Robert said firmly. I have multiple witnesses. My doorman saw her in the lobby this morning. She's upstairs with my housekeeper right now, probably raiding my refrigerator and asking Mrs. Patterson 1,000 questions about everything she sees. I'm not questioning her existence, Dr. Chen said gently. I'm questioning the supernatural elements of your story. Children are remarkably intuitive, especially traumatized children. They can pick up on details adults miss, make connections we don't see. Robert leaned forward and pulled out his phone. Then explain this. He showed her a photograph he'd taken the previous evening when Lily was napping on his couch. I took this yesterday when she fell asleep watching cartoons. Dr. Chen examined the image of Lily, sleeping peacefully, clutching her stuffed rabbit while afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows. She looks like a perfectly normal child, Robert. Thin, probably malnourished, but normal. Look closer, at the reflection in the window behind her. Doctor. Chen enlarged the image on his phone screen and gasped, nearly dropping the device. In the glass reflection, barely visible but unmistakably present, was the translucent figure of another child. A girl with dark hair and Robert's distinctive grey eyes, wearing what looked like a yellow sundress. "That's impossible, Doctor," Chen whispered, staring at the image with the expression of someone whose worldview was crumbling in real time. "I've been researching unexplained phenomena all night," Robert said. "Children who appear during times of crisis, guardian angels taking physical form, spirits who manifest to help the living process grief and trauma. Robert, you're a businessman, not a mystic. You've built your entire career on facts and figures, market analysis, and logical decision-making. The facts don't make sense anymore, Rebecca. A homeless child with no documented past knows intimate details about my dead daughter. She appears impossibly on my balcony at the exact moment I'm about to end my life, and now there are photographs showing Emma's spirit in the same room." Dr. Chen set down the phone with trembling hands. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," Robert admitted, "but I can't let her go back to the streets. And I'm starting to think that whatever Lily is, wherever she really came from, Emma sent her to save my life. And what if she's here to save more than just your life? What if she's here to save your soul?" Ldun, March 15th, arrived grey and bitter, the kind of Manhattan morning that cut through expensive coats and settled deep in your bones like an old ache. Robert stood at his office window on the 42nd floor, staring down at the intersection of 5th Avenue and 42nd Street, where Emma's life had ended exactly 3 years ago. Every year since the accident, he'd spent this day alone in his office, drowning in guilt and single malt whiskey, until the calendar mercifully turned to March 16th. But this year was different. This year, Lily sat cross-legged in the oversized leather chair across from his mahogany desk, quietly coloring with the box of 64 Crayola crayons he'd bought her yesterday. She'd insisted on coming to work with him this morning, saying with that unnaturally wise expression that she didn't want him to be alone today. "She was crossing the street to buy you a birthday present," Lily said suddenly, not looking up from her drawing. Her small hand moved the red crayon in careful, deliberate strokes. A coffee mug from the gift shop in the Chrysler building that said "World's Best Daddy" with little pink hearts around the edges. She'd been saving her allowance for 6 weeks, counting every penny twice. Robert's hand trembled as he reached for his coffee mug, ironically a plain black one that said Harrison Industries in simple block letters. He'd never told anyone why Emma had been in that crosswalk at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. The police report simply stated pedestrian fatality during lawful crossing. But Emma had saved every dollar of her allowance, had begged him to take her shopping downtown that day. "The drunk driver's name was Marcus Webb," Lily continued, switching to a black crayon and adding shadows to her drawing. "He survived the crash with just a broken collarbone and some cuts, but he didn't remember anything because of the alcohol, so the courts could only give him 18 months. That's why you blame yourself instead of him, because he doesn't even remember taking her away from you." Robert's coffee mug slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor in an explosion of ceramic and hot liquid. "Lily, please stop. You can't possibly know these details." "She wants you to know something important," Lily said, finally looking up from her paper. Her blue eyes shimmered with unshed tears that seemed to hold the weight of worlds. "She wants you to know that the very last thing she saw before the light took her wasn't the truck speeding toward her. It was your face in the window of the coffee shop across the street, and she was smiling because she couldn't wait to surprise you with your present." Robert's legs gave out. He sank into his desk chair, his entire body shaking as 36 months of carefully suppressed memories came flooding back. He had been watching from the coffee shop window. He'd seen her skip into the crosswalk, had seen her turn to wave at him with that radiant smile that lit up his entire world. Lily set down her crayon and walked around the massive desk. She climbed onto his lap, something she'd never done before, and wrapped her tiny arms around his neck with surprising strength. "She forgives you, Daddy Robert," she whispered against his ear, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to echo from somewhere beyond the physical world. "She forgives you for not being fast enough to save her. She forgives you for all the nights you've blamed yourself, and she wants you to forgive yourself too, because she can't be completely happy in heaven while you're destroying yourself down here." For the first time in 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days, Robert Harrison began to cry. Not the silent tears he'd shed at the funeral, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from the very core of his being. 36 months of grief, guilt, and self-hatred poured out of him like poison from a wound. But as his tears fell onto Lily's golden hair, he noticed something that made his blood freeze in his veins. On her drawing paper was a perfect sketch of Emma, a child Lily had never seen, wearing the exact yellow sundress she'd died in, right down to the tiny butterfly pin on the collar. And in the corner of the paper, written in Emma's distinctive handwriting with its careful loops and flourishes, were 4 words that changed everything. Take care of each other. 2 weeks after the anniversary, Robert's world had transformed in ways he'd never imagined possible. Lily had brought laughter back into his penthouse, filling the cold marble spaces with crayon drawings taped to refrigerators, stuffed animals scattered across Italian leather furniture, and the joyful sound of children's television shows echoing through rooms that had been silent as tombs for 3 years. For the first time since Emma's death, he'd actually smiled, not the practiced corporate smile he wore for board meetings and investor presentations, but genuine happiness that reached his eyes and reminded him what it felt like to be human. Mrs. Patterson, his housekeeper, had commented that the apartment felt alive again. "It's like watching a garden bloom after a long winter," she'd said, watching Lily teach Mr. Whiskers to dance to cartoon theme songs. Even Marcus, his usually stoic driver, had started keeping a box of animal crackers in the glove compartment, specifically for their new passenger. But their fragile peace shattered at exactly 3:17 a.m. when Lily's screams tore through the apartment like breaking glass, so sharp and terrified that Robert felt them in his bones before his mind fully processed the sound. He burst into her bedroom, the guest room he'd transformed into a 7-year-old's paradise with pale pink walls, a canopy bed covered in butterfly patterns, and shelves lined with books and toys, to find her sitting bolt upright, her small body drenched in sweat despite the apartment's perfect climate control. Her cornflower blue eyes were wide with terror he'd never seen before, and she was staring at the floor-to-ceiling window that faced downtown Manhattan, trembling like a leaf in a hurricane. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant hum of the city that never slept. "The dark ones, they know where I am now. They can smell the truth on me." "Who's coming, sweetheart?" Robert asked, gathering her into his arms without hesitation. Her skin was ice-cold despite the perspiration soaking through her purple pajamas, the ones covered in shooting stars that she'd insisted on buying herself with the allowance he'd started giving her. Her heart was beating so fast he could feel it against his chest like a caged bird trying to escape. "The people who made the accident happen," Lily said, burying her face against his shoulder with desperate intensity. "The ones who killed Emma and my foster parents. They've been watching us, waiting to see if I really am what they think I am. They don't want me to help you remember what Emma tried to tell you before she died." Robert's blood turned to ice water in his veins. "What did Emma try to tell me, Lily? What are you talking about? Before she could answer, every light in the penthouse went out simultaneously, not just the lamps and overhead fixtures, but the digital clocks, the security system indicators, even the emergency lighting that was supposed to be on an independent power source. The backup generators should have kicked in within 3 seconds, but the darkness remained absolute, pressing against them like a living thing. Then, slowly, impossibly, a cold blue glow began emanating from Lily herself, starting as a faint shimmer beneath her skin and growing stronger until she was illuminated like a Christmas angel. The light revealed intricate patterns beneath the surface of her flesh, not quite circuitry, not quite veins, but something that looked like constellation maps written in languages that predated human civilization. "They're in the building," she whispered, and Robert realized with growing horror that her voice was coming from everywhere at once. The walls, the ceiling, the very air around them, vibrating inside his skull like tuning forks. "They've been watching us for days, mapping our routines, waiting for the right moment. They know about the message Emma left for you. They know you're close to understanding." "What message?" Robert demanded, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew. The drawing. Emma's handwriting in the corner of Lily's artwork 3 weeks ago. "Take care of each other." It hadn't been just a goodbye, it had been instructions. It wasn't just a note from heaven, Lily confirmed, her blue eyes now glowing with the same ethereal light that pulsed beneath her skin. It was a clue. Emma discovered something before she died, something that powerful people killed her to keep secret. She tried to tell you that day, but they silenced her before she could get the words out. And now they know you're starting to remember what she was really trying to show you. The private elevator in the hallway outside dinged softly. Impossible, since Robert's penthouse required a special keycard, biometric scan, and security codes that changed daily. The sound echoed through the apartment like a death knell, followed by heavy footsteps moving across his marble foyer with military precision. "We have to go," Lily said, taking his hand with fingers that burned like dry ice. "Right now, before they reach us. There's something Emma hid in your office, something she left for you to find when you were ready to see the truth. But if they get to us first, if they silence us like they silenced her, the truth dies with us, and millions of people will suffer." Lily, you're scaring me," Robert said, though he was already moving toward his bedroom to grab clothes and his emergency cash. "You're just a 7-year-old girl. How could you possibly know about corporate conspiracies and cover-ups?" "No," she said, and suddenly her voice carried the weight of centuries, the authority of someone who had seen civilizations rise and fall. "I'm not just a girl, Daddy Robert. I'm what happens when love refuses to let go. I'm what Emma became when she realized the only way to save you, to save everyone, was to come back in a form they wouldn't recognize until it was too late." The penthouse door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and twisted steel, revealing dark figures in full tactical gear pouring through the opening like a black tide. Red laser dots danced across the walls, searching for targets. Robert grabbed Lily and ran toward his private emergency elevator, the one that led directly to the parking garage through a shaft that wasn't on any building plans, but he knew with bone-deep certainty that running wouldn't be enough. Whatever was happening, whatever truth Emma had died to protect, the only way out was through the very heart of the darkness that had taken everything he loved. They made it to Robert's office building through the labyrinthine network of underground tunnels that connected Manhattan's corporate towers, a system built during the Cold War and known only to a handful of city planners and security professionals. Lily navigated the abandoned corridors with the confidence of someone who'd spent years exploring their depths, leading him through maintenance passages, forgotten subway platforms, and steam tunnels that hadn't appeared on city maps since the 1960s. "How do you know about these tunnels?" Robert asked, as they climbed a rusted service ladder toward street level, his expensive suit torn and dirty from their underground journey. Above them, he could hear the distant sounds of sirens and helicopter rotors, their pursuers mobilizing resources that suggested they were dealing with far more than common criminals. "Emma showed me," Lily replied with matter-of-fact simplicity that made the impossible sound perfectly reasonable. "She used to explore down here when she was supposed to be in daycare at the Meridian Center. She was curious about everything, always asking questions that made adults uncomfortable. She found something in these tunnels that she wasn't supposed to see." They emerged through a maintenance hatch in the basement garage of Harrison Industries, the 40-story monument to Robert's business empire. Using his executive keycard and biometric scanner, they reached his private office on the 42nd floor via the express elevator that bypassed all other floors. The building felt different at night, colder, more ominous, filled with shadows that seemed to move independently of any light source. "What exactly are we looking for?" Robert asked, as they entered his corner office with its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline. The room that had been his sanctuary for over a decade now felt like a museum of a life he no longer recognized. "Emma said you'd know when you saw it," Lily replied, moving directly to his massive mahogany desk with its hand-carved details and hidden compartments. "She said you keep everything important in the same place you kept her drawings when she was little, the place where you put things that meant more than money." Robert's breath caught in his throat. The bottom drawer left side, the same place he'd hidden Princess Patches 3 years ago, unable to throw away Emma's beloved teddy bear, but unable to bear looking at it either. With trembling hands, he opened the drawer and carefully moved aside the purple bear he hadn't touched since the day after the funeral. Underneath, wrapped in one of Emma's old school folders decorated with rainbow stickers, was a manila envelope he'd never seen before. Written across the front in Emma's careful third-grade handwriting were the words, "For Daddy, when he's ready to see the truth about everything." Inside were photographs, dozens of them, showing men in expensive business suits meeting in what was unmistakably the executive boardroom of Harrison Industries. The pictures had been taken from above, probably through the ventilation system, and showed clear faces, documents being exchanged, and briefcases full of cash changing hands. Robert recognized several faces immediately. Marcus Webb, the supposedly drunk driver who'd killed Emma. But in these photos he was clearly sober, wearing a tailored business suit and carrying legal documents. Senator Patricia Mills, who'd been instrumental in passing recent environmental deregulation legislation that had made Robert's company millions. Dr. James Caldwell, the EPA administrator, who'd been surprisingly cooperative with several of Robert's more questionable projects. But most shocking of all was Richard Blackwood, Robert's business partner and closest friend for over 15 years, the man who'd stood beside him at Emma's funeral and helped him through the darkest period of his life. "Emma took these over several weeks," Lily explained, her child's voice carrying knowledge that no 7-year-old should possess. "She discovered that your company was being used as a front to launder money for a group that profits from environmental disasters. They create accidents that look natural, oil spills, chemical leaks, mining collapses, then profit from the cleanup contracts, insurance payouts, and the rebuilding that follows." Robert's hands shook as he studied photograph after photograph, revealing a criminal conspiracy operating from within his own company. But why would they kill Emma? She was just a curious child taking pictures. "Because she wasn't just taking random pictures for fun," Lily interrupted, her blue eyes glowing faintly in the office's dim lighting. "Emma was brilliant, Daddy Robert, really, truly brilliant. She figured out what they were planning next, their biggest operation ever, and she tried to warn you the day she died." Robert's mind raced back to that terrible Tuesday afternoon, replaying memories he'd avoided for 3 years. Emma had been unusually excited about something, bouncing with nervous energy and insisting they go downtown immediately. She'd said she had something super-duper important to show him, something that couldn't wait even one more day. "The coffee shop meeting," he whispered, the pieces finally clicking into place. "She didn't want to go shopping for my birthday present. She wanted to show me something in the Chrysler building." "The evidence," Lily confirmed with a nod that carried Emma's mannerisms. She'd hidden copies of everything in a safety deposit box, along with her analysis of what it all meant. But they figured out what she'd discovered, so they staged the accident to silence her permanently before she could expose them. The office lights flickered ominously, and Robert heard the distinctive mechanical whir of his private elevator ascending from the garage level. Their pursuers had found them, just as he'd known they would. "We have to get that evidence," Robert said, his paralyzing fear transforming into cold, murderous determination. "If Emma died protecting it, then we're going to make damn sure her sacrifice wasn't in vain." But as they moved toward the emergency stairwell, Lily stopped suddenly, her face pale with a realization that seemed to age her decades in seconds. "Daddy Robert," she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that made the windows vibrate. "There's something else. Something I haven't told you about why I'm really here, and what will happen to both of us when this is over." They reached the Chrysler building through a combination of death-defying rooftop jumping that should have been impossible for a middle-aged businessman and a 7-year-old child, and what Robert could only describe as supernatural assistance that defied every law of physics he'd ever learned. Lily moved across the Manhattan skyline like gravity was merely a suggestion, guiding him through maintenance accesses, service corridors, and building-to-building connections that shouldn't have existed. When they had to leap across a 20-foot gap between buildings, Lily simply took his hand, and they floated across like dandelion seeds on an impossible wind. When security cameras turned to track their movement, the devices mysteriously malfunctioned. When motion sensors should have triggered alarms, the systems went dead. "How are you doing this?" Robert asked as they descended through the Art Deco interior of the Chrysler building, moving past sleeping security guards who seemed unable to see them. "The rules are different when you're caught between worlds," Lily explained cryptically. "Some things that should be impossible become necessary." Chase Manhattan Bank occupied the first 3 floors of the building, and despite being well past midnight, Lily walked directly through the locked glass doors as if they were made of mist. Robert watched in stunned disbelief as she simply passed through solid matter, leaving no trace of her passage except a faint shimmer in the air. "How did you—" he began. But she was already inside, motioning for him to follow. When he tried the same door, it opened easily under his touch, though he was absolutely certain he'd watched her walk through locked glass. The sensation was like stepping through a soap bubble. There was resistance for just a moment, then nothing. "Time and space work differently for me now," Lily explained, as they descended toward the underground vault levels via a service elevator that operated without anyone pressing buttons. "The boundaries between what's real and what's possible have become flexible." The safety deposit box was registered under Emma Catherine Harrison's full name, with Robert listed as the emergency contact and sole beneficiary. The bank manager, a middle-aged man named Jeffrey who looked confused and slightly dazed, opened the vault area without question, despite the impossible hour, as if he were operating under some form of gentle but irresistible compulsion. "I'm not sure why I'm doing this," Jeffrey mumbled, as he led them through multiple security checkpoints that should have been impenetrable. "Protocol says I should call the police, should verify identity, should—" He trailed off, shaking his head like someone trying to wake up from a dream. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do, Lily said softly, and her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in Jeffrey's bones. Because truth deserves to be free. Inside Emma's safety deposit box were documents that could topple governments and destroy corporate empires. Corporate emails detailing planned environmental disasters spanning the next decade, financial records showing payments to corrupt officials in 12 countries, geological surveys identifying the most vulnerable points in the global ecosystem. And most damning of all, a detailed operational plan called Project Reset that outlined a massive oil drilling disaster in the Arctic that would generate hundreds of billions in cleanup contracts while simultaneously eliminating environmental protection laws worldwide. Emma photographed and analyzed everything, Robert said, his voice filled with awe and heartbreak as he read through his daughter's meticulous notes written in her careful third-grade handwriting. She was trying to save millions of lives and didn't even fully understand what she'd discovered. She was trying to save you, Lily corrected gently. When she realized your company was being used as a weapon against the planet, she knew it would destroy you spiritually if you found out the wrong way. She wanted to give you the chance to be the hero instead of the unwitting accomplice. Robert's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Richard Blackwood. Despite every instinct screaming at him not to answer, he found himself accepting the call. "Robert, thank God." Richard's voice was strained, desperate, carrying an edge of panic Robert had never heard before. "Where are you? There are some very dangerous people looking for you, and they're not interested in taking prisoners. They say you have something that belongs to them." "I know what you did, Richard," Robert said quietly, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. "I know about the conspiracy, about Emma, about Project Reset, about everything." Silence stretched across the connection for nearly 30 seconds. Then Richard's voice returned, smaller and more defeated than Robert had ever heard it. "You don't understand the scope of what you're dealing with, Robert. These people have resources beyond imagination. Private armies, government connections, technology that makes science fiction look primitive. They'll kill anyone who threatens their operation, and they'll make it look like an accident, just like they did with Emma." "They already killed my daughter," Robert said, surprised by the ice-cold calm in his own voice. "And they'll kill you too, unless you hand over whatever evidence you found and walk away." "Robert, I'm trying to save your life here. I'm trying to give you an out before this goes too far." Robert looked at Lily, who was studying him with those impossibly wise blue eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. In her expression, he saw Emma's determination, her fierce protection of what was right, her absolute refusal to let evil win through inaction. "Some things are worth dying for, Richard," Robert said, and meant every word. "Emma understood that better than any of us ever did." He hung up and turned to Lily. "Now what do we do with all this evidence?" "Now we make sure the truth spreads faster than they can contain it," she said, her smile carrying secrets that spanned dimensions. "But first, there's something I need to tell you about what I really am, and why Emma could only come back in this specific way." Before she could continue, every light in the bank vault began to flicker, and they heard the sound of multiple vehicles surrounding the building outside. Through the windows, Robert could see black SUVs and unmarked vans positioning themselves at every exit. "They've found us," Lily whispered, her form beginning to shimmer like heat mirages rising from summer pavement. "And this time, they're not planning to leave any witnesses." As dozens of armed figures in tactical gear surrounded the bank building, Lily's carefully maintained human facade began to dissolve like morning mist touched by sunlight. Her skin became translucent, revealing intricate patterns of light that pulsed with her heartbeat like living circuitry designed by angels. Her cornflower blue eyes deepened to an otherworldly shade that seemed to contain entire galaxies spinning in miniature, and her blonde hair began to float as if she were underwater. "I need to tell you the truth about what I really am," she said, her voice harmonizing with itself in impossible ways that made the very air around them sing with frequencies beyond human hearing. "I'm not just a spirit reaching out from beyond, Robert. I'm not just Emma trying to comfort you from heaven." The temperature in the vault dropped 20 degrees in a matter of seconds, and Robert's breath became visible as he watched the child he'd come to love transform into something far more complex and beautiful and terrifying than anything his rational mind could process. "I'm what they call a nexus," Lily continued, her small hand still warm and solid despite the supernatural cold emanating from her transforming being. "A convergence point where multiple realities intersect, where the boundaries between life and death become permeable. Emma didn't just send me to you, she became part of me, along with others who died protecting truths that could save the world." "Others?" Robert whispered, though part of him already understood what she was going to tell him. "The Parkers, David and Sarah, my supposed foster parents, weren't killed in a random car accident," Lily revealed, her form now shifting between the appearance of a normal 7-year-old and something that looked like it had been carved from starlight. "They were investigative journalists who'd discovered the same conspiracy Emma found. When the organization realized how close they were to exposing Project Reset, they staged the Brooklyn Bridge accident to silence them permanently." Robert's mind reeled as the pieces fell into place. So when they died, their souls, their determination for justice, their love for truth, it all joined with Emma's spirit in the space between worlds, Lily explained. "And when a homeless girl named Lily Chen froze to death in Central Park 3 weeks ago, a little girl whose only crime was having no one to protect her, we all came together in her body to finish what David and Sarah and Emma had started." The revelation hit Robert like a physical blow. "You're telling me that I'm Emma's love for you, combined with the Parkers' investigative skills and determination for justice, all manifesting through the innocent soul of a child who deserved so much better than the world gave her," Lily said, her voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to come from multiple throats speaking in perfect unison. "We're all here, Robert, fighting together to expose the truth before Project Reset destroys everything we love about this planet." The bank's main doors exploded inward with the force of shaped charges, and tactical teams poured into the building like a black tide of death and destruction. But something extraordinary happened as they approached the vault level. Their high-tech weapons simply stopped functioning. Automatic rifles jammed, night vision goggles went completely black, radio communications filled with static. Even their body armor seemed to become heavier, more cumbersome, as if the very laws of physics were working against them. "They can't hurt us here," Lily explained, her form now shifting rapidly between human-child and something that looked like it belonged in religious art depicting divine intervention. "Truth has power in places like this, where secrets are kept safe. The accumulated weight of all the evidence stored in these vaults creates a kind of protective field." "But they'll keep coming," Robert said, watching through security monitors as confused tactical teams struggled with malfunctioning equipment. "Even if we expose the conspiracy, they have unlimited resources, government connections." "Not anymore," Lily interrupted, her smile carrying Emma's warmth, but also something infinitely more powerful and determined. "While we've been gathering this evidence, every single document in that safety deposit box has been simultaneously uploaded to news organizations worldwide. The Washington Post, The Guardian, WikiLeaks, the BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera. The information is already spreading faster than they can possibly contain it." Robert stared at her in amazement. "How is that even possible? We didn't have internet access down here." "I told you, the normal rules don't apply to us anymore," Lily said, her laughter sounding like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "The internet is just another space to exist in when you're made of light and love, and absolute determination to see justice done." Around them, the tactical teams had completely stopped their advance, their commanders apparently unable to understand why their equipment was failing so catastrophically. Through the vault's reinforced windows, Robert could see news helicopters already circling overhead, drawn by reports of the data dump that was about to change everything. "So what happens now?" Robert asked, though he was beginning to understand that this story was much bigger than his personal grief. Lily's expression grew infinitely sad, and for a moment she looked exactly like Emma had on the morning of her death, young and innocent but carrying knowledge that seemed too heavy for such small shoulders. "Now you become the man Emma always believed you could be," she said softly. "You use your wealth and influence and business connections to make sure this evidence brings down the entire network. You save the millions of lives Emma died trying to protect, and you make sure no other children have to sacrifice themselves to expose the truth." And what happens to you?" Robert asked, though his heart was already breaking with the knowledge of what her answer would be. "We have to go back, Daddy Robert," Lily said, and suddenly Emma's voice was speaking through her lips with perfect clarity. "All of us. We were only allowed to stay long enough to set things right, to make sure the truth survived. Our work here is finished." "I can't lose you again," Robert whispered, gathering her glowing form into his arms. "I can't lose Emma again. I finally got you back." "You're not losing us," Lily said, her voice now a perfect blend of Emma's innocence and the Parkers' determination and the original Lily's pure heart. "We're graduating, Daddy Robert. We're moving on to whatever comes next, knowing that we succeeded, knowing that love really is stronger than death, and that truth really can triumph over evil when people are brave enough to fight for it." As sirens wailed throughout Manhattan and news of the conspiracy began breaking simultaneously across every major media outlet in the world, Robert understood that his real journey, his transformation from broken billionaire to guardian of his daughter's legacy, was just beginning. The conspiracy unraveled within 72 hours, like a house of cards in a Category 5 hurricane, creating a media firestorm that reached every corner of the globe simultaneously and brought down power structures that had seemed untouchable just days before. The evidence Emma had gathered, combined with Lily's supernatural distribution methods and the Parkers' meticulous investigative framework, created an avalanche of revelations that no amount of money or influence could stop. Corporate executives were arrested on live television during board meetings and congressional hearings. Politicians resigned in disgrace as their email communications were read verbatim on evening news programs. Environmental protection agencies that had been compromised by decades of corruption were disbanded and rebuilt from the ground up under international oversight. The Project Reset operation, which would have devastated Arctic ecosystems while generating trillions in profits, was exposed and permanently shut down before a single drill could break ice. Robert found himself thrust into the center of it all, no longer the broken billionaire who'd been contemplating suicide on a Manhattan balcony, but a crusader for environmental justice, carrying his daughter's legacy like a sacred torch. He testified before Congress with the passion of someone who'd literally been touched by angels. He donated hundreds of millions to legitimate environmental causes around the world. He transformed Harrison Industries from an unwitting tool of global destruction into a force for planetary healing, retrofitting his entire corporate empire to focus on renewable energy and ecosystem restoration. But the victory, as complete and world-changing as it was, came with a price that grew heavier with each passing day. Lily was fading away like a photograph left too long in sunlight. It started subtly, in ways that Robert might have missed if he hadn't been watching her with the intensity of someone who'd already lost everything once. Her laughter became softer, less substantial, as if it were coming from farther away. Her footsteps on the marble floors of his penthouse grew lighter until they made no sound at all. She still lived in his guest bedroom, still filled his days with joy and wonder. But Robert could see through her skin now, could watch her heart beating with patterns of light instead of blood. "How long do we have?" he asked one evening as they watched the sunset from his balcony. The Manhattan skyline spread out below them like a glittering tapestry of human dreams and ambitions. "Not long now," she admitted, curling up in his lap like any normal 7-year-old seeking comfort from a beloved parent. "The connection between worlds is closing as the crisis resolves. We were only supposed to stay until the truth was safe, until justice was assured. Our purpose is nearly complete." "I don't know how to say goodbye again," Robert whispered, stroking her increasingly translucent hair that felt like spun moonlight beneath his fingers. "I just got you back. I just learned how to be happy again." "You don't have to say goodbye," Lily said, and suddenly it was Emma's voice speaking to him with perfect clarity, carrying all the love and wisdom of a soul that had transcended death itself. "Because we're not really leaving, Daddy. We're just changing form, moving into the work you'll do from now on, living in every life you save and every truth you help expose." And that night, as Lily slept in the guest bedroom that had become her sanctuary, surrounded by stuffed animals and children's books and crayon drawings that would soon be the only physical proof she'd ever existed, Robert sat vigil beside her bed like a guardian angel himself. He could see other figures now, shadowy forms that had become as familiar as family, David and Sarah Parker standing protectively nearby, their journalists' eyes still alert for any sign of danger, and the faint outline of another child, the original Lily Chen, whose body had become a vessel for love itself. "Thank you," he whispered to all of them, his voice breaking with gratitude and grief in equal measure. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for saving the world. Thank you for showing me that death isn't the end of love. It's just love finding new ways to exist." Emma's spirit materialized just long enough to kiss his forehead with lips that felt like warm starlight, and he heard her voice one last time. "Thank you for being brave enough to let us help. Thank you for becoming the hero I always knew you could be." By morning, the bed was empty, except for Mr. Whiskers, somehow solid and permanent despite everything else fading, and a single piece of paper covered in the most beautiful crayon drawings Robert had ever seen. At the top, written in Emma's distinctive handwriting with its careful loops and artistic flourishes, were the words, "The end of one story, the beginning of forever." The drawing showed a man with grey eyes standing in front of a massive building that looked remarkably like the new Harrison Industries headquarters. But instead of looking sad or lost, he was smiling with genuine joy. Around him were dozens of children from every corner of the world, some holding protest signs demanding environmental justice, others planting trees and cleaning polluted rivers, all of them working together to heal a wounded planet under the guidance of someone who understood that love never truly dies. At the bottom of the page, written in multiple handwritings that represented every soul who touched this impossible story, was a message that would guide Robert for the rest of his life. Love never dies. It just finds new ways to save people. And every time you help someone, every time you fight for truth, every time you choose hope over despair, we're right there with you. Outside his window, Manhattan was waking up to a world where truth had triumphed over corruption, where a little girl's courage had toppled an empire of greed and environmental destruction. For the first time in 3 years, 2 months and 16 days, Robert Harrison smiled without counting the cost, understanding finally that his greatest adventures were still ahead of him. But what he didn't yet know was that Emma's work, their work together, was far from over, and that love really could transcend death when it had important work left to do. 6 months later, Robert Harrison stood before the United Nations General Assembly, addressing world leaders who had gathered for an emergency climate summit that would have been unthinkable before Emma's truth changed everything. The man who spoke that day bore little resemblance to the broken billionaire who'd contemplated suicide on a Manhattan balcony. This Robert radiated purpose, hope, and an unshakable conviction that love really could move mountains. My daughter Emma was 7 years old when she discovered a conspiracy that threatened every living thing on our planet, Robert began, his voice carrying to every corner of the assembly hall and to millions watching around the world. She died trying to protect a truth too big for her small shoulders to carry alone. But death, as it turns out, was not the end of her story. It was just the beginning. In the month since the conspiracy's exposure, the world had transformed with breathtaking speed. Project Reset's cancellation had prevented an environmental catastrophe that would have poisoned Arctic waters for generations. Corrupt officials in 12 countries faced justice for the first time in decades. The Harrison Foundation, rebuilt from the ground up with Emma's values at its core, had funded the largest reforestation project in human history, planting over 1 billion trees across 6 continents. But the most profound changes weren't measured in trees planted or criminals prosecuted. They were measured in the subtle transformation of human consciousness that occurred when people understood that a child's love had literally reached across death to save them. The evidence my daughter gathered didn't just expose a criminal conspiracy, Robert continued, his grey eyes shining with unshed tears that carried joy instead of grief. It proved that when we love something enough, truly, completely, without reservation, that love becomes a force that transcends every boundary we thought was absolute. As he spoke, Robert felt a familiar warmth on his shoulder, the gentle pressure of a small hand that no one else could see. Emma was there, as she'd been during every major moment of the past 6 months, watching her father become the man she'd always believed he could be. After his speech, as world leaders committed to the most aggressive environmental protection measures in history, Robert walked alone through Central Park to the bridge where Lily had once hidden as a homeless child. The spot had become an informal memorial, covered with flowers and drawings left by children who'd heard her story and wanted to honor the girl who'd helped save the world. "I kept my promise," Robert whispered to the late afternoon air. "The truth is safe, the planet is healing, and I'm finally the father you deserved." A gentle breeze stirred the leaves overhead, carrying the sound of children's laughter from a nearby playground. But there was something else in that breeze, a whisper that might have been wind, or might have been something far more precious. "Thank you, Daddy. But our work isn't finished yet." Robert turned, his heart racing, and there she was, not Lily this time, but Emma herself, translucent as moonlight but unmistakably real. Behind her stood the Parkers, David and Sarah, their journalists' badges still visible on their ethereal forms. And beside them, holding Emma's hand, was the original Lily Chen, no longer the terrified homeless child, but radiant with the joy of a soul finally at peace. "We came to say goodbye properly this time," Emma said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the very air around them shimmer. "And to tell you about the children." "What children?" Robert asked, though part of him already knew. "All around the world, children who should have died are living instead," Sarah Parker explained, her investigative instincts still sharp, even in death. "Children in war zones who find impossible shelter. Children with terminal illnesses who recover without explanation. Children trapped in trafficking rings who escape against all odds. Every life saved by the truth we exposed, every policy changed, every forest protected. It creates ripples," David added. "And those ripples have power to save other innocents who might otherwise be lost." Emma stepped closer to her father, her spirit form more solid and real than anything else in the world. "We're not really gone, Daddy. We're just working in different ways now. Every time someone chooses love over hate, truth over lies, courage over fear, we're there. We're part of that choice. Robert felt tears streaming down his face, but they were tears of wonder rather than grief. So this is what heaven is, continuing to help. Heaven is love in action, the original Lily said, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who'd learned that suffering could transform into purpose, and love never stops working to make things better. As the sun set behind the Manhattan skyline, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple that Emma had always loved, the four spirits began to fade like morning mist touched by sunlight. "Will I see you again?" Robert asked, reaching out to touch his daughter's face one last time. "Every day," Emma promised, her smile brighter than the stars beginning to appear overhead. "In every child you help, every truth you protect, every moment you choose hope instead of despair, we'll be right there with you, Daddy, always." They faded gradually, their forms becoming one with the gentle evening breeze that carried the scent of flowers and the distant sound of children playing. But before they vanished completely, Emma's voice echoed once more through the park. "Remember, love never dies. It just finds new ways to save people." Robert stood alone beneath the ancient oak trees, but he didn't feel alone. For the first time since that terrible day 3 years ago, he understood that death wasn't an ending. It was a transformation. Emma hadn't left him. She'd simply expanded beyond the boundaries of physical existence to become part of something infinitely larger and more beautiful. As he walked home through the city that hummed with new hope, Robert felt his daughter's presence in every act of kindness he witnessed. A teenager helping an elderly woman with her groceries, a businessman sharing his umbrella with a stranger in the rain, children planting flowers in a community garden that hadn't existed before the conspiracy's exposure. The next morning, Robert received a letter from a children's hospital in Kenya, thanking the Harrison Foundation for funding that had saved hundreds of young lives. Attached was a drawing made by a 6-year-old patient, a picture of an angel with blonde hair and blue eyes, protecting children all around the world. At the bottom, written in a child's careful handwriting, were 4 words that made Robert's heart soar. "Emma is helping us." Robert smiled. A real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face, and got to work. There were letters to write, projects to fund, truths to protect, and children to save. Emma's work would continue through him, and through every person their story touched, and through every child who learned that love really was stronger than death. Outside his office window, Manhattan sparkled in the morning sun, and somewhere in that golden light, a 7-year-old girl with grey eyes and an unshakable faith in her father's goodness smiled and got back to the eternal work of saving the world, one heart at a time. Love never dies. It just finds new ways to save people. And sometimes, if you listen carefully to the wind, you can still hear the children laughing,